It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm glad the Aspen Institute organizers have finally figured out a way to entirely exclude Christians from the panel. There's just like, there's none up here.
There can be 3 Muslims and a Jew.
3 Muslims and a Jew.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, they get everything else.
That's right. They get everything. So it's great to be here with three Muslims. Arsalan Iftikhar is an international human rights lawyer based in Washington, D.C., where his fiancée is going to move from London to join him, so he must be a great guy. And he's the author of Islamic Pacifism, Global Muslims in the Post-Osama Era. He's senior editor for Islamic Monthly magazine and a very popular speaker on campuses, as well as notable for his writings in Islamic Monthly, where he's a senior editor, and at the website, themuslimguy.com. Reza Aslan is creative writing professor at the University of California, Riverside, and a writer and scholar of religions. His books, which have sold enviably well, include Zealot, The Life and Times of Jesus of Nazareth, and No God But God, The Origins, Evolution, and Future of Islam. And Dalia, will you pronounce your last name for me?
Mogahed.
Mogahed, okay. I did know that, but I figured you'd do a better job than I would. Is Director of Research at the Institute for Social and Policy Understanding, a think tank focused on opportunities and challenges in the Muslim American community. She's the former Executive Director of the Gallup Center for Muslim Studies, and therefore has a track record as one of the leading pollsters on Islamic issues and in the Muslim world altogether. What's interesting about all three of them is that they are, they represent in some ways the arrival of that most loathed but in a way needed class of people, which is a new class of pundits. We always need more people talking at us on CNN and C-SPAN and MSNBC and going on talk radio, and now the Muslims get a turn, and these are three of the people who do it the most. And what I'm curious about, and I'm going to have a few questions that'll take us about through the halfway point, and then I know that you will have more and I hope better questions. What I'm curious about, and I'll turn first to Arsalan, is what are some of the challenges that come from being called on to speak on behalf of a community of how many people in the world now?
1.7 billion.
1.7 billion. You know, to a community of people, that is to say, in the Western world or the Anglophone world, the English-speaking world, who often have misconceptions, who look at a Sikh and think that that's a Muslim. I have a friend who's an Orthodox rabbi who all the time gets mistaken for a Muslim. You are often put in the position of explaining issues, often after there's been some sort of horrible episode in the news, on so-called on behalf of the Muslim community. Is that a difficult position? How do you handle it?
How much time do we have? Yeah. About 49 minutes. It's not easy, but like any other minority demographic group in the United States, this is part of our civil rights struggle, right? When you look at religious minority demographic groups in American history, whether it's the Catholics at the turn of the 20th century, obviously the American Jewish community, we're sort of we're at the prologue of our book on civil rights, and because of that, people tend to view us as a monolith. They tend to view all Arabs as Muslims, all Muslims as Arabs. We're that one monolithic major demographic group within our Western media zeitgeist. And what the three of us obviously try to do is to help show that there's diversity in our community, that we're as screwed up as any other group, that we have the same issues, and we're as non-monolithic as everyone else. And I think that has been, I think one of my key challenges is sort of like chipping away at that monolithicism, if that's even a word, in the way that the average person views Muslims in our modern age.
So give me an example of an encounter with an interviewer or an episode of your having to explain Islam with all of its internal struggles and divisiveness and whatever, in a way that they were getting it wrong and you would just set them right.
Well, I mean, just to give you an idea, as to how quote-unquote other Muslims have felt in America, once I did a live nationally televised debate on a network that will remain nameless, Fox News. And I was live at the anchor desk with the news anchor, and we cut to commercial, and the producers are taking off my microphone and my makeup, and without blinking, the anchor looks at me and she goes, "That was a really good interview. Your accent didn't come through at all. Where are you from?" And I said, "Chicago." And she goes, "No, where are you really from?" And I said, "Chicago." And she asked me a third time, "Where are you really from?" And I said, "Chicago," and I walked out of the studio. You know, to her, she could not fathom that a brown man would be able to walk into her television studio, be able to articulate himself in a live 7-minute nationally televised debate without having some sort of stereotypical bobbleheaded accent. You know, the notion that I was not an American within her cultural framework. I mean, this is somebody who's part of the so-called intelligentsia of America, right? And so imagine when you're dealing with people, you know, average Americans who know little to nothing about Islam. And, you know, you can imagine that it makes the upward trek much harder.
Reza, you've recently written a book that Christian friends will not stop recommending to me. If one more of my Christian friends says, have you heard of this Reza Aslan guy? As if they don't know that what I do for religion is write about people like Reza Aslan. You know, you got to read this book, it's about Jesus. So you've been thrust into a position where I imagine you all of a sudden, having already had a career encountering people for writings on Islam, or all of a sudden you're like in demand at evangelical campuses, I would guess.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, what's that been like for you? Or do you find when you encounter the Christian community in particular, do they come to you as a kind of wonderful, charming Oriental specimen, or do they come to you as thinking you have wisdom to share? How's that going so far?
I'm still trying to fathom the whole like Fox News anchor as part of the American intelligentsia.
I know, so-called. I said so-called. I know.
I think she was asking about your Chicago accent.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
no, it's been great. It's been great for me. Now, I mean, the truth is that this is something that I'm very familiar with and I'm comfortable with, and I think other people perhaps ascribe certain identities to those of us who are of a certain pigment and who, you know, sometimes are on television, particularly when we're talking about news and commentary. And so this sort of, I think for a lot of people, it's odd that I'm, you know, speaking to Christian audiences, or I'm speaking in synagogues or what have you. But that's just life for me. That's the career for me. So it doesn't feel all that different. I think for me, what I'm really fascinated by is not Islam. People constantly refer to me as a scholar of Islam. I'm not a scholar of Islam. I'm a scholar of religions, particularly the so-called Western religions. And so I tend to kind of revel in the conversations that come out of these kinds of interfaith, intercommunal communities that I speak to a lot. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fun.
No, you're often called upon, Dalia, to break down the figures and the statistics for people and to give them actual numbers.
Yeah, she's the one with the facts.
And actual facts, unlike us humanists. And
we just
we just try to
opinions.
We look pretty.
1 billion Muslims, 1 million, it's a lot.
Whatever.
They're everywhere.
Yeah.
And yet there's all that evidence showing that you can clobber people over the head with actual facts, and if anything, it only entrenches their own misguided beliefs. I mean, how do you find that the media uses you or uses actual statistics or your commentary on them to get the truth out? Does it help at all?
I would like to think it helps a little. But I think, you know, one really key statistic that I want to share today is one that I didn't come up with, but in fact, it's not even polling data. It's media content analysis data on the U.S. news media. And this firm in Germany called Media Tenor found that 80% of news coverage of Islam and Muslims in U.S. news media is negative. Now, just for reference, when you look at news media or coverage of North Korea, that number is 71% negative. So when we're dealing with a designated, you know, enemy of the United States, it's a little better than Muslims and Islam. And so these kind of figures, what do they mean and why do they matter? One issue is that we have an election coming up, and we are expected as, you know, members of a democratic society to vote according to an informed decision. So when media is so biased about a really important issue facing our country in terms of our engagement in the Middle East and wars we fought, I'm concerned that failure to correct these misconceptions with facts actually hurts our democracy, that it's actually a lot bigger than just, you know, a tiny minority group getting a bad rep.
So, but, you know, let's move beyond that and talk about what possible solutions could be. And to do that, I actually want to play devil's advocate, to use a Roman Catholic term that none of us would have any use for, which is, you know, devil's advocate was the person who argued against sainthood when they were deciding whether to canonize someone. So Which is to say, as a journalist, right, for a daily newspaper, I can tell you that every single group thinks that they're only portrayed in a negative light. Now, it is certainly the case that Muslims get portrayed worse on average than the Southern Baptist, right? But Mormons feel that every story about Mormonism is about polygamy, which of course they ended in 1890, right? Orthodox Jews feel that they are always portrayed as, first of all, the only Orthodox Jews ever shown are Hasids, right, who have the black hats and the beards, which is not in fact what most Orthodox Jews look, right? So this is a complaint that I, for example, in my email inbox get relentlessly from every minority community. How much of it is related to the fact that news often means bad news, right? It means crimes. It means an Orthodox rabbi spying on women in a ritual bath, to take one example, or a Catholic priest molesting children. How much of it is specific to the Muslim community? But moreover, what is the antidote? Lots of happy stories about puppies, like on the local news?
Okay, let me answer that.
Yeah, I think all three of you might have answered that.
But let me start by saying that this same report actually does look at portrayals of other faith communities. And by far and away, Muslims are the most negatively portrayed group, and it's not in our head, it's in the data. When it comes to how Christians and Jews are portrayed, when it comes to their protagonists, it's usually religious leaders. And it's neutral, mostly neutral. When it comes to Muslims, the protagonists representing this community are not religious leaders, but militants, armed militants. So it's, you know, the data really very clearly shows that Muslims are portrayed much more negatively than any other community. And what's the anecdote? Accurate, objective reporting. So they basically rate things in three ways: negative, positive, and neutral. And most groups are getting neutral coverage, whereas Muslims are getting mostly negative coverage.
But I'm just going to sort of flip this on its head for a bit here, because I think that the standard response to everything that Dalia said was that, well, the media is at fault, and what the media is doing is peddling, you know, this kind of fear-mongering and anxiety about Muslims. But the media, particularly cable news, is just a commercial enterprise. Its primary purpose is not to give us information, it's to sell us Coca-Cola and Viagra. That's the only reason that it exists. And
My two
so,
favorite products.
Right. And so, especially when you look at the 24-hour cable news landscape, they are desperately vying for a tiny audience. And by the way, let me just pause for a moment and explain what I mean by tiny audience for a moment, because the absolute most watched cable news show, Bill O'Reilly, on the most watched cable news program, network, Fox News, barely gets 1.5 million viewers. A rerun of Third Rock from the Sun gets 30 million viewers. So this is a infinitesimally small group, but we give it so much power in our conversations about it, particularly Fox News, particularly Bill O'Reilly. I mean, when the President of the United States is making policy decisions based on what it's going to look like on Fox News, it gives you a sense of how warped our sense of the influence of the cable news landscape actually is. But to my larger point, they are giving the viewers what they want. The reason the media perception of Muslims is so overwhelmingly negative is because Americans' perceptions of Muslims are overwhelmingly negative. That's what Americans want, that's what they buy, and that's what the media gives them.
So you're saying they produce segments that will keep people from switching the channel.
That's right.
Okay, so how many people in this room have heard of CNN anchor Don Lemon?
Oh, good old Don.
Okay, how many of you a couple months ago remember that there was a story about Don Lemon on the night of the Paris Charlie Hebdo attacks asking a Muslim human rights lawyer whether he supported ISIS or not? Yeah, that was me. I was that guy. I was that Muslim human rights lawyer that Don Lemon asked on national television on the night of the Paris Charlie Hebdo attacks, when I was there to condemn the attacks, which I did for the first 4 out of the 6 minutes. He then started to cite this obscure poll from Newsweek on French Muslims, and as I'm explaining my answer in a follow-up question, he asks me, so do you support ISIS? Now, for a minute, remember this, I'm a Muslim human rights lawyer, and he just asked a human rights lawyer if he supports an organization that violates human rights every single day. It's the moral equivalent of asking a white man if he supports the Ku Klux Klan. There were over 5,000 media articles that were written in the next 24 hours on that big Don Lemon gaffe. And I assure you, had I been any other religion other than Muslim, I would not have been asked if I supported a terrorist organization. When we talk about the coverage of Islam and Muslims in our media zeitgeist, yes, people of all religions are covered in the media, but there is no religious demographic group in the world today that is placed with more collective guilt in the media than Muslims. So when a Muslim does something, Muslim thought leaders, scholars, everybody has to make the rounds and condemn these attacks. But when Anders Breivik in Norway slaughters 77 teenagers and tries to assassinate the Prime Minister of Norway and leaves behind a 1,500-page treatise calling himself a soldier of Christianity, we do not expect the Vatican to come out with public responses. We don't expect Christian leaders to come out and do that. But even though we do this, and we've done this until our hairs have turned white for the last 15 years, still people say that Muslims don't condemn terrorism enough. If you type in the words Muslim condemn terrorism on Google, you'll get over 700,000 results. You're not looking if you don't think that Muslims don't condemn terrorism. But it's fed into this narrative not only about Islam and Muslims being equal to terrorism, but now the term terrorism has been co-opted to only apply when a brown Muslim man does an act, and when a white Christian guy goes into a church in South Carolina and has a race war ideology and slaughters 9 innocent African American people, that is now called an act of domestic terrorism. I promise you, if he was a brown Muslim, it would have been.
Yeah, by the way, that's not just, talk. I mean, so in 2010, a far-right anti-government terrorist by the name of Joseph Stack flew an airplane into an IRS building, killing a government official, left behind a big manifesto saying that the only response to the American government and its crimes is violence. He was not designated a terrorist. When Jared and Andrea Miller, those anti-government zealots in Las Vegas, assassinated police officers, left behind a "Don't Tread on Me" flag and carved left swastikas on them, they were not designated as terrorists. When Michael Wade Page walked into a Sikh temple and slaughtered 6 people, he was not called a terrorist. Dylan Roof is not called a terrorist, which is a proof that the word terrorist is totally meaningless. It says far more about the person using the word than the person being described. And I think that's precisely the point that I was trying to make, is that the media functions in the same exact way that a ABC late night drama functions. And I can tell you that having sat in editorial rooms at major news networks and having been in numerous writers' rooms for network dramas, I can't tell the difference between the two. Because I sit in these editorial rooms and it's like, what's the story? Who's the protagonist? Who's the antagonist? What's the arc? Where's the climax of it? Where's the danger? Like we're talking about revenge or something,
So I honor everything that all of you are saying, because I've been in those meetings as well, and so I know, and everyone should know.
You're print, so that's
I am
different.
print, but everyone should know, for example, that writers don't write our own headlines. So you can write this incredibly sober story that gives credit to both sides and that is very thoughtful and sane and whatever. And the headlines are written by copy editors or desk editors or the web editor, who then says what's going to be optimized for search engines. And that's a different calculus than how do you write a fair and sane article. So nothing gets under our skin like the idea, but your headline said this. I said,
know.
That's not the article, right? But let me ask you this. So from the point of view of a reporter looking to do justice to a story that involves Muslims, right? One of the dilemmas that I could tell you reporters sometimes face is the question over the battle of authenticity within the community, right? So if you're looking to go do a story on Jews, you can call the Reform rabbi, who will tell you that Torah is largely metaphorical and you don't have to believe every last thing, and even if you don't want to keep kosher, that's no problem, right? And the conservative rabbi, who will be somewhat to the more traditionalist side of that, or you can call an Orthodox rabbi who may have some somewhat more literalist or tradition-laden interpretation, and they could have a variety of views on Israel, and you can sort of almost pick and choose and see what can I fit into 700 or 800 words, right? Sometimes with other communities, and Islam is not alone in this, like the Mormon Church would be a perfect example. When you reach out to certain leaders whom you know to, for example, not be Quranic literalists, they will not want to give their names. But then when you call the imam, who is very hardline,
Amjad Chaudhry,
and was trained
one dude,
and was trained in Egypt, and whatever, The hardline guy is absolutely happy to make headlines for you with some very fire-breathing interpretation.
Yeah.
So the question is, how, as a journalist, does one cut that knot? Right?
I'm sorry, I'm going to have you answer this for a second, but I just want to say that part of it has to do with just frank laziness on the part of a lot of journalists.
Sure. Unquestionably.
If you want to get that fire and brimstone, America is Satan, we're coming after you, there's a guy that all you have to do is call him.
And it's always a guy.
And it's always, it's the same guy, Amjad Chaudhry. It's the same exact dude. And he will just, Google him, and then every article, there he is. He's right there. If you need that quote, he will provide it for you. If you need someone to be on TV to, debate the idiotic, the fringe version of a point, there he is. So part of it, honestly, it's just a real lack of attempt on a lot of journalists to kind of dig a little bit deeper and actually look for nuance, look for argument. And by the way, to revel in the nuance, to simply say, there is no answer to this, there is no interpretation to this. Yeah, X says, it's bad, but X doesn't speak for anyone. This guy over here says that it's okay. This is the problem with Islam, is that you got a religion of 1.5 billion people with no center, no centralized religious authority. Nobody gets to say who is and who is not a Muslim, what is and what is not Islamic behavior. Exactly. Right. At least at the very least, like you've got an Orthodox rabbinical council. We don't even have that. Right. And so anyone becomes a source of authority. Anyone who wants to is and by the way, that's what's beautiful about Islam. It's why it's been such a profoundly democratic religion from the very beginning. But it also, in the modern world, has created these incredible problems, which is that anyone with a loud enough megaphone is that Muslim Pope now.
What about the question of authenticity?
I think the question of authenticity is exactly as Reza said. We don't have a central authority. But as a democratic religion, we can look at numbers, right? We can look at where the majority lie, where is the mainstream. So any community has a mainstream and has fringes. To have the fringe speak for the mainstream, I don't think is authentic. And you can find what that mainstream is by looking at vast amounts of polling. There is really good data to show that the mainstream, the bulk, the majority of Muslims would disagree with the views that are often used to voice their opinion. So I sometimes talk about this idea of the silenced majority. They're not silent. They're screaming from the rooftops about condemning these things, but they're ignored by the media, and then these fringe elements are being given a megaphone.
Because they're entertaining. They're enormously entertaining, and the media is in the entertainment business.
If it bleeds, it leads, right? The more it's sensationalistic, the more it's sexy, the more controversial something is. Before this Don Lemon gaffe, what most people don't know is I'd been on Don Lemon's show 6 times before that in the last 8 months, and every time, my hand to God, the topic was, do we have a problem with radical Islam? Like one after the other. I'm like, dude, I talked about this with you last week with 3 other panelists.
He thought that was a different Muslim.
Well, no, and it was always me. I was the token Muslim, and then there were 3 right-wingers that were saying, yeah, we have a problem with Islam as a religion, and I did this freaking 4 weeks in a row. I mean, like, talk about, I'm 37, I have the white hairs of a 51-year-old. There's a reason for it.
Well, just to add one point, when you look at neurology, okay, neuroscience, and you look at the impact of fear, and that's what this is creating, right? We're being fed fear 24 hours a day. When you look at the impact of fear on people, here's what it does. It makes you more susceptible or more supportive of 3 things: authoritarianism, prejudice, and one more, which is conformity. Okay, 3 things that are the exact antithesis of democratic principles. So the point that I really want you to leave with, if you forget everything that I've said at least, is media fear-mongering is not a problem for Muslims. This is not an issue for 1% of the population. This is an issue for 100% of the population. Because when we're fed fear day in and day out, we are not critically thinking, we're not voting based on an informed opinion, and the very foundation of our democracy is being compromised.
And we're ignoring very real dangers. You all, I'm sure, read that big front page New York Times piece last week that said since 9/11, more than twice as many Americans have been killed by far-right extremists, by anti-government extremists, by white supremacists than by Islamic terrorists. And by the way, twice, it's far more than that because, as I said, Joseph Stack doesn't count, Michael Wade Page doesn't count, Dylan Roof doesn't count. And so the idea that there is a serious, and by the way, neither does any mass shooting. No mass shooting counts in those figures. Not a single mass shooting from Newton, Massachusetts, and so on. None of that counts in that figure. So it's probably 6, 7 times as many. But we're willing to just kind of let that go because we are so single-mindedly focused on what is a very real threat, but a threat that, according to the FBI, kills fewer Americans than faulty furniture does.
I have one last question, then I want to turn it over to you. So start thinking about what you're going to ask the panelists. And the question is this, because you are all, I think, more international in your travel than I am, and more people fly you more places to talk than fly me, though I got to come to Aspen.
So did we.
Yeah, so did you. Is the calculus different in Europe? And I mean this in several ways, right? First of all, I think the numbers about the percentage of terrorist crimes that may be committed on behalf of Allah, allegedly, versus other groups, may be different in other countries. In other words, there may be countries where if one were to quantify one's fear, you'd come up with a different calculus. Not that that's the most sophisticated way to walk through one's days, right? But I also meet it on the other side, which is the BBC handling it differently? Is Agence France Presse handling it differently? Is Al Jazeera in their Arab world incarnations handling it differently? So how does this panel go differently if we're not in the United States?
Well, I think that's a really good question, Mark. And that goes to the duality of many of our existences. Like, people don't understand that, when we go on television here, we're seen as the Muslims, but when I go on Al Jazeera, I'm seen as the American. Right? So when I go on CNN, it's just always like, why don't you Muslims condemn terrorism? When I go to Al Jazeera, it's like, why don't you Americans close Guantanamo Bay? And I have to be like, whoa, I'm screwed either way, right?
But they figure Obama.
Well,
like you could just close.
Well, I actually do know Obama from our Chicago days, but again, that's neither here nor there. And to assure you, he's not a secret Muslim. He didn't know our secret handshake, so you don't have anything to worry about. But there's a duality. I mean, even the media is not a monolith, right? European networks like the BBC will cover issues differently than we do here. Al Jazeera certainly covers things differently, sometimes for better or for worse. Genoa or Agence France Presse. I mean, we have to. Because of the ubiquitous nature of the internet, and it's not about people watching TV. It's about the sharing of the videos. It's like people share clips. That's how things get viral. Right? I mean, anything that happens in Bali, Madrid, London, Mumbai is going to have a direct impact on us here in America instantaneously now in a way that not even 10 years ago it would have been as ubiquitous, right? And so even the term media has become far more decentralized from the standard broadcast networks, and I think that that's an important distinction.
So were they better over there, or are they worse?
They're better in some ways and they're worse in some ways. I mean, European racism is far more overt than American racism. And so, if you look at the Islamophobia that happens in Europe, it's like in France, for example, if you have a North African, Arab, Muslim-sounding name and you have your name on a resume, they will literally throw it into the garbage. They don't even front like they're giving you an equal opportunity there. There are 25-30% unemployment rates in the banlieue of Paris that I've traveled to on behalf of the French Foreign Ministry after the social unrest in 2005. So not only is no religion monolithic, but even if you look at every paradigm, British Muslims are different than French Muslims, which are different than Dutch Muslims, which are different than American Muslims, which are different than Indonesian Muslims. And so it's breaking this sort of monolithic iceberg that we've created of the green Muslim threat, and actually see that it's not a giant iceberg, it's just 9 more manageable
ice cubes.
Okay.
To add some numbers, so the percentage of terrorist attacks in Europe carried out in the name of Islam are in the single digits. That's according to the UN. So it's not this epidemic problem in Europe. However, when you look at media coverage, I think the real difference is in the United States, the focus is on security. So it's looking at the Muslim community through the security lens. And I think that there are actually some advantages to having it that way, because we can have a rational conversation with numbers on this issue of security. The problem actually in Europe is they're less worried, maybe they are a little bit more now, but traditionally over the past 15 years, less worried about security and more worried about Muslims being a cultural threat, a threat to European identity. And so when it gets to those kinds of things, it's much harder to have a rational conversation.
Because even if they're all peaceful, they're still going to
Right, but look at how they're dressed. It's offensive to our French identity. So we're freaking out just because they're existing as who they are.
Sir, wait, yes, always wait for the 70s era foamy topped microphone. Yeah.
Thank you. One of the interesting, my name is David Cunyan. I live in Minneapolis, New York. You mentioned the internet and sharing, and one of the fascinating things about sort of the terror that's being the fear thing that's coming out is sort of the use within ISIS of very imaginative uses of real terror here, and it's not shown on the TV, but the internet has allowed these beheadings to be, and I'm curious in particular about one piece, which is the women's thing, where clearly when they got the B-roll, when they got the back to the edit suite and they saw what it was like to behead this woman, they had to make up a story about a collateral damage thing so that because they understood that they'd get a response off the internet if they posted it, 10x of whatever the Jordanians were responding to the flaming pilot. And so I'm just curious how the women's issues, there was a big deal about the brides coming to become a part of it too, and it not just being this misogynistic group of guys, but it seems to me that one of the biggest flaws in what ISIS is about and the terrorism they're projecting is this misogyny that's underneath it. That clearly, the prophet, his wife was a queen. He venerated his wife, She taught him so much about politics and everything, And that's the ISIS version of what the relationships
are. What's the question?
The question is, how does the fear piece work with this ISIS group? How are they using the internet as they're really? It's a tactic as a part of this, and in particular, the women's issue seems to me the Achilles heel.
Great.
Yeah. Well, I often say that ISIS is sometimes more a media organization than a military organization. If it wasn't for the media, they would be probably 10% of what they are. So I agree with you that their use of media is one of the most powerful tools. And so it does beg the question, how are we empowering them by allowing that kind of material to spread, and by giving them, in many cases, the rhetorical victory that they crave by assigning them sort of authorities or voices to speak on behalf of Muslims around the world. Now, when it comes to women, I think you're right. I think that their anti-women policies are probably going to be one of the most powerful ways to convince, those who might support them today, which is a small minority, that they are not what they claim.
Vox actually had a really interesting phrase that they started to use for these videos. They call it terrorist clickbait. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really fascinating what's happening, because to me, the real horror is that it's losing its impact, right? Mm-hmm. Now, when they behead someone, it doesn't really get going as much. Hence the attempt that you saw, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, where they did that whole, we're going to beheading, incineration, drowning, and blowing up. They're running out of ways to get people to pay attention to these videos anymore. And it, again, begs this sort of further question about the problem with ISIS is that they have the seeds of their own destruction embedded within them, very much as Al-Qaeda did, because the way that they get their attention is through these spectacular displays of violence. But those displays, because they just have to get more and more grotesque, begin to either stop working or turn people off. When Al-Qaeda starts saying that ISIS is no longer, they're now banned from paradise because of all the Muslims they've killed, I mean, that should boggle the mind,
Oh, boy.
Ma'am. Oh.
Sorry, I was handed the mic.
You were handed the mic, so it's been taken out of my hand. And okay, no,
We're usurping
We're happy for you to ask this question.
I'll be quick. So, I guess the question that I have is, I'm a filmmaker and I work in the media and social issue documentary in New York City, and I've worked with the organization Just Vision, and we have done 2 pieces, one called Budros, which is about a nonviolent movement in the occupied Palestinian territories, and this was a number of years ago, although it won numerous awards and the Puma Impact Award and had tremendous grassroots impact. We were not able to get distribution in the US. And we were, in fact, told by PBS, even though it was chosen for one of their programming slots, that they would lose their funding. And they could not air it. So we've been facing this. We did another piece called My Neighborhood, which aired on Al Jazeera. It seems that Al Jazeera is one of the only outlets for a positive story, or a story that does not paint Muslims in a negative light. I guess my question to you is, with the sort of the advance of the internet and broadcast shrinking, aside from complaining endlessly about Fox News, what is the call to action for us? What do you suggest that we do?
In terms of getting
Getting
media outlets,
more of our stories
more
out
stories
there
out into media
that
outlets.
are positive. I mean,
Great question.
What do you recommend as solutions?
That's a good question. We talked a few minutes ago about there being an adage in journalism: if it bleeds, it leads, right? So again, the more sensationalistic, the sexier, the more controversial a story, the likelier it is to get airtime. It's far less sexy to talk about, a Muslim community like donating their time at a soup kitchen, or a free health clinic on the South Central Los Angeles that provides free health care to underprivileged people. I mean, the stories are out there. They're not getting covered because they don't bleed, right? And we've now entered this narrative. One of the things that I always enjoyed, I spent 7 years as a weekly commentator on National Public Radio. One of the things I loved the most being an NPR commentator was when I didn't talk about religion or terrorism. So when I talked about universal health care or the comprehensive immigration reform, because here people were, for the first time, for many people, they were seeing the Muslim guy talking about something that's not related to religion and terrorism. That's something that people think we're one-trick ponies, right? We can only talk about religion or terrorism. That we don't, we don't have to pay for, our kids' schools or health care, or worry about things that affect all other human beings. I think the major challenge has been the humanization, phenomena, because again, 70% of Americans say that they've never met a Muslim before. They don't know a Muslim. Well, their doctor's probably a Muslim, their mechanic's probably a Muslim. They just don't know it yet, right? And I always tell people as a human rights lawyer that it's very hard to demonize people once they've been humanized to you. So if you look 20 years ago, the gay marriage...
I was going to say, this is like the gay debate,
Yeah,
right?
this is the gay marriage debate from 20 years ago, which was the most vitriolic, polarizing debate in America. But now, as a matter of course, we have marriage equality laws all across America, because people, even if they are philosophically or morally opposed to gay marriage, they probably have a gay cousin somewhere. So I always joke around. I say, I wish people had Muslim cousins, so that we can be a little humanized to people. And it's all about getting to know the other, and it's important because you're an other to somebody else. And that's why we do what we do, is because we do have this sort of undying love for humanity, because we're trying to show the diversity within our community that exists, and it's hard sometimes getting those stories on the air.
I want to say something to that, actually. So, can I say something to that? Which is that as a reporter at a relatively high-profile place that covers religion and has millions of readers, you know who calls me? A lot of Jews. They're great at getting media coverage. Sometimes evangelicals, and once in a while the archdiocese. I don't know how often Muslims call me. Almost never. Now that's also true of Lutherans. It's also true of Unitarians. There's lots of groups.
There's a real lack of sophistication.
There's
in the
just a
way that
tremendous
Muslims deal
lack of
with it.
sophistication in terms of outreach, in terms of calling a reporter. Now this doesn't answer your question of how you get your documentary, out there to millions of people. But in a lot of communities, what's interesting to me, and this goes into fear and it goes into sense of stigmatization and mistrust of the media, often a well-earned mistrust. Sure. But what's so interesting is that a lot of, reporters say yes if you offer to have lunch with them, and at the local level, what's interesting is how much better certain communities are at that than others.
I'll give you specific advice. Ignore the media altogether. Distribution channels at this point are so grand. The truth is that if you put it on PBS, maybe 1.5 million
Yeah, I was going to say,
people
that's not
watch
where you
it.
want it.
Yeah, hardly anyone watches it. VOD is where you want it. You want to put it on the internet. You want to make it very easy for people to download. You want to get it to other people. And a place like Just Vision, which is not a for-profit company, I know because I've donated thousands of dollars to Just Vision, and Budros, which had this enormous impact so that no one in their right mind is allowed to say ever again, how come there's no Palestinian nonviolent movement? Okay, that person just gets smacked in the head now. Because of Budros. That's the way to do it.
Probably not smacked in the head, we hope. For
Well,
the nonviolent
maybe,
movement,
yeah,
but-
yeah, peacefully smacked.
Peacefully smacked.
Rhetorically. So I think that's what you need to focus on is direct delivery of content. The traditional distribution model is dead.
Another endorsement for Budros. Absolutely mind-blowing.
How do you spell it?
Budrus.
Incredibly moving story.
I want to get to the woman up here I left hanging before.
Hello, how are you? Hi, Dalia. I try to be an open-minded person. I live in the United States. I do travel, but over the last 10 years, Islam and Muslim, the whole culture has become is new to me, and so I'm absorbing, I'm meeting, and what I've learned in general is that Muslims want to destroy Israel. That if they come into your community, they want it to be Sharia law. They don't want your community. They want their own community. Basically, there was one more. And then you have ISIS.
We can fill in the blanks.
What?
We can fill in the blanks for you.
You can fill, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
So where do I go to learn the Islam that you love and to understand
here's
it
a better
better?
question. Where did you learn that information?
Just, I guess, I mean, I read the newspapers.
No, you didn't get that from newspapers.
those are not newspapers.
There is no
There's
no
internet-
newspaper.
These are email chains, internet.
There is absolutely not a single
I don't do
newspaper
internet.
that
I don't
said
do
any of
Facebook.
those things.
So, are you sure?
Yeah, except for
then
maybe like the New
Muhammad-
York Daily News or
I
something.
read something about Muhammad. It said he took a 9-year-old bride, and he was very evil, and he was only a.
You didn't read that in
do
the
you believe
newspaper.
It was a book then.
Okay,
So
sure.
which books do I read to find something different?
I'm not
Well,
going to
no,
answer
actually,
that.
the Shah of Iran talks about destroying Israel all the time.
Who?
So that is news. The Shah of Iran talks about destroying Israel. So that is
There's
news.
no Shah of Iran anymore. So I'm not
Whatever,
sure.
I'm sorry. I'm nervous.
No, it's okay. Yeah.
no.
Can
I
I
think
intercede
what
here for a
Catherine
moment?
is saying-
Can I intercede for a moment and
Yeah.
say, I think she's asking an utterly
No, I know.
sincere and
I know.
important
Incredibly
question.
important
Yeah.
question.
What should she be reading and
Yeah.
watching?
No, hold on. I'm not, by the way, I'm not saying that that's not a sincere
I know you're
question.
not.
What I'm saying is I get that question all the time. And the truth of the matter is that the answer is embedded in the question. We live in a world that is saturated by information. If you want to find out something negative about Islam, it's very easy. If you want to find something positive about Islam, it's very easy. I don't see why that's a question. You know,
Well, No, let me actually,
I'm gonna
I'd like
make sure
to
they get
answer
to
your
that.
question.
But, yeah.
I'd like to answer your question. I think there are lots of books, and there are also other media opportunities that you can find. I mean, I'll recommend the three of our books, okay? No God But God, my book, Who Speaks for Islam, What a Billion Muslims Really Think, and I'm sorry, what's the name of your book? Islamic Pacifism. So those are three great resources. But I think what Catherine is saying is incredibly important because when you look at the data, this is really important. Americans who claim to know nothing about Islam do not have prejudice. Americans left alone in complete ignorance are not prejudiced. Americans who say they know something will actually admit to some prejudice. So Americans in sort of like their natural state are not prejudiced people. They are taught. We are taught hate. We are taught these things. So to say that the media is simply, I'm just going to disagree. I understand you know way more about media than I do, but to say that the media is simply giving Americans what they want, I think is a little bit chicken and egg. They didn't start out that way. The media gave Catherine this idea. She didn't start out thinking Muslims want to take over with Sharia and whatever and destroy Israel. That this was something that she started out neutral, didn't know anything about Islam, and then was given this information. So there is a responsibility for the media to be somewhat informative and at least objective when it comes to this topic. Otherwise, they are not meeting what should be a role to educate a citizenry to be a citizen in a democratic society.
I'm also going to say that from the point of view of a journalist who knows the metrics of what plays, and I'm going to disagree a little bit here again, Reza, just in this one sense. Yes, negativity plays, but so does like treacly positivity. I mean, it's when it bleeds, if it bleeds, it leads, or if it's puppies, right? And what's interesting is, like, Lubavitcher Jews are good at having Adopt a Puppy Day, because that's not bleeds, it leads, but it's cute. Yeah. And you know, what's interesting is the sophistication, and again, the fault lies 95% with the laziness of the media and of media consumers.
We Muslims don't get the cute.
But
we try.
Yeah, but I mean, what's interesting is evangelicals are brilliant at creating photo ops that involve charity and outreach. And so it's both, but I do think it is 95% the laziness of the media. My advice to you would be 24-hour cable news of whatever stripe is probably your problem. Yeah, I mean,
turn off your TV.
Let me say the last
talk
point
to
that I
another
was going to
person
make.
who
There you
happens to
go.
be a
Thank
Muslim.
you. That's what I was going to say.
Talk to a Muslim?
Is that it's not enough to
Hug a
say,
Muslim.
here's a different book or here's a different newspaper, because that's just data. And as Dalia said, data doesn't change people's minds. It's important, but it doesn't. What changes people's minds is relationships. So stop like looking for, alternative sources of information and just get to know a Muslim.
All right, Connor, right here. Thank you so much. I want to get to as many questions. He has the mic already, or you're just pointing hard at him? No, could we go to Connor right here, and then we'll go to that gentleman afterwards? Thanks. Blue fuzzy mic, Connor. There we go.
The upside of going on cable TV or talk radio, and this is something I know as a print journalist and I struggle with, is that you reach a lot of people and perhaps persuade them. The downside is that you're participating in a format that you maybe regard as irresponsible, a host that's sensationalistic, or even willfully misleading. Yeah. And you risk lending legitimacy to it in some sense, right. And putting yourself in a venue where the playing field is tilted against what you believe to be the truth. So how do you weigh those factors and reach a judgment about whether to accept a particular invitation or go on a particular show?
Well, Connor, I can answer that really easily. The dilemma.
Very good.
No,
very good.
It's very easy. If we don't do it, they'll find some other idiot who's gonna muck things up, right? They'll find their caricature, and and that's why there are very few of us that sort of do this full time, because we understand the importance of getting accurate narratives out there, because we know that the clowns are out there also, and Fox News has them on all the time. And so that's how you weigh things. I mean, when a producer calls us, first you find out what's the topic. Okay, well, do we have a problem with radical Islam? All right, red flags are up. You know what you're dealing with. All right, who are the other guests? Right? If you're talking about former CIA Director Jim Woolsey and a few other, of our neocon friends, you know that you're going to deal with that whole dynamic. And then when you finally decide that it's going to be hosted by Don Lemon, right? And then you think to yourself, all right, I've done this before and I do it competently. If I don't do it, and Reza doesn't do it, and Dalia doesn't do it, is this going to bring more harm than good to the community? And that's where we answer the question. That's why this is not a vanity exercise. We don't get. I still eat ramen noodles and peanut butter. They don't pay us to be on television. We have high profiles.
Sometimes they send a car.
Yeah, they do.
That's the most you get. They send a car.
And so this is actually a labor of love. I mean, people don't understand. People sort of laugh at the pundits and the chattering class, and that's fine. But it is a labor of love. And when you realize that these people are getting out to a lot of other people, not through a direct broadcast, but again through the YouTube clips, right? If there's something, if Don Lemon asks you, do you support ISIS? Well, that's going to get 5.6 million hits, and 15 years of journalism that you've done, this is going to make you more famous than those 15 years of journalism. But again, these are the narratives that people watch, and so you want to make sure that there's as competent of a voice on there representing Muslims as possible. If not, that the segment can actually do more harm than good.
So to this gentleman back here, I want to get in a few more questions, so I'd ask that they be brief, because I want to engage as many of you as possible.
I want to ask the panel what they think the reason the media is calling them in. Isn't it because there's been a terrorist act somewhere, or the Ayatollah of Iran says something outrageous? Would you rather the media just ignored all this?
Yeah, that's usually when the phone call comes. Yeah.
But they come to us because we're trusted voices to them, right? We've been doing this for 15 years. We call out Muslims when we need to call out Muslims, and we call out right-wing racists when we need to call out right-wing racists. We're public intellectuals. And our job is to bring intellectual honesty into our debates and, call a spade no matter where it is. That's why we condemn every act of terrorism as being antithetical to any normative mainstream teaching of Islam, and we have no problem doing that. And we also call out the Islamophobes and the Muslim haters out there. And people come back to us because they know that we're intellectually honest. We bring a fair game every time.
I
yes,
just
ma'am.
wanna add
Oh,
one
I'm
thing.
sorry. You go ahead, Dalia. I'm sorry.
No, these incidents, when there's a terrorist attack or when the Ayatollah of Iran says he wants to destroy Israel, no, the media should not ignore that. And what I'm asking the media to do, what I'm calling for, is objective coverage, not positive coverage. We're not asking for favors, we're asking for fairness.
Yes.
I went to an exhibit in Alcatraz about political prisoners. And as part of the exhibit, you could send a postcard any place in the world. And the friend that I was with asked whether it got translated for the recipient. And the person said they didn't know about the back end, but at the front end, pretty early after the project started, they realized they had to bring in translators because there were a lot of people who were writing essentially hate mail to these political prisoners, and that in the vast majority of cases, it was Middle Eastern political prisoners. And as part of the exhibit were incredibly detailed, thoughtful biographies of all of these people and what they were trying to do politically, artistically. And when you have something that's laid out as sort of sensitively as that, and people still are sending hate mail to people who are essentially politically on our side or on the side of liberalism, how do you get through?
Can I add one thing about hate mail or actually even death threats? This is a true story. Vox printed the Charlie Hebdo cartoons, okay? They actually reprinted them. And they said they got 0 death threats or, they got no threats for that. But printed an article saying that continuously asking Muslims to condemn terrorism was bigotry because you're starting out from a position of suspicion and asking them to prove that they're innocent. That was a racist position to take. So calling out Islamophobia, they said they got death threats for that article, but not for reprinting the Charlie Hebdo cartoons.
All I can say is all the death threats I get are in English.
Yeah. and I stopped keeping track after about 1,000.
Right. And thank goodness for that. Right. Yes, right here. You. Microphone's coming. No. Wait. No. Right here. Oh. Down farther. I'm sorry. Here we go. Thank you. Stand up.
Hi there. I just wanted to ask a question about audience, because I think that a lot of what we're doing on this panel and also just in general is addressing a community that is not Muslim. And how do you determine what is sort of like a space to talk to Muslims about issues such as, like, for instance, I'm a queer Muslim and we don't have a lot of media presence to discuss those issues amongst our own populations, much less outside. So where do you put your energy? Because you can't be the same person, all the same energy, saying all these different things.
I mean, the audience does really change with the messages. I speak to a lot of Muslim groups, and I am really, I'm not very kind to them. And what I see is the failings of the American Muslim community. And I see those failings in threefold. Number one, we are filthy, stinking rich. I mean that. According to JWT, the annual disposable income for the American Muslim community, by the way, that's about 3 million of us, is $170 billion. And so when I go to these sort of big fundraisers for a mosque or whatever, and they're like, oh, but Rink Santorum is so mean to us. And I'm like, well, then punish him, because that's how it works in America. If Sheldon Adelson can say, I will spend $100 million on whoever happens to be the most pro-right-wing Israeli presidential candidate, $100 million to the Google, CFO is nothing. So stop complaining about how you're treated in America by its politicians, by its media, and do what all the other Americans do, use your money to make it stop. And secondly, stop complaining so much about your problems and your issues and the bigotry that you're facing, the marginalization that you're describing. That's not how things happen in America. The way that you actually get Americans to care about your marginalization is to care about other people's marginalization. So with regard to the LGBT issues, so Hassan Minhaj and I just wrote an op-ed. It's like an open letter to our fellow American Muslims about why they should celebrate the Supreme Court decision. And a huge argument to it is that the same Constitution that finally just gave LGBT Americans the same rights and privileges as everybody else is the same Constitution that keeps your Islamic schools open, that keeps your mosque open in the face of overwhelming hatred and bigotry in this country towards your community, and you can't celebrate one without the other. I think those are the two issues that we have to constantly give to the American Muslim community here.
Just to add to that, my work right now is entirely focused on the American Muslim community, and a lot of it is in looking at and researching internal challenges and issues within the community, one of which is being more inclusive of different people within the community. The other thing on this issue of supporting other people's marginalization, one piece of research that my organization just came out with looked at anti-Sharia legislation and how people who propose anti-Sharia legislation at an 80% overlap were also proposing legislation that was curtailing the rights of other people, including the gay community. So it's not only sort of theoretical that Muslims should be building coalitions with other communities that are marginalized, but it's empirical that when you have one issue, you often are the same person is impacting the rights of many others.
All right, we have time for just another question or two. Yeah, sir, down here. Here we go. You want to stand up so everyone can see and hear you?
Yes. This is no reflection on you or Islam or anything.
Hold the microphone.
Yes.
There we go.
All right. I don't know a lot about Islam itself, but I know that there's a great portion of Islam that promotes a lot of goodness, very similar probably to the basic values of the Ten Commandments and other religions that promotes love for people and equalization and everything. Now, but there's also a portion of Islam, and this is a question. Now, Sharia law, let's put it this way. Sharia law is, I don't know one other religion that promotes the idea if you don't believe the way that I do, I'm either not going to have anything to do with you, you are terrible, and besides they can inflict violence
Sir,
on
I'm asking you to a question.
Okay, the
right
whole
now.
thing with all of these apostate, misogyny, all of these terrible things that they do to women and how they look at women. I mean, come on.
Have you ever read the book? Have you read the book?
Can you please explain
Have you-
this,
Please
how
explain
this is
it. All right,
positive?
their question is, please explain it.
Have you read the book of Leviticus or other biblical? I mean,
Jewish books. You can say it. You can say it. Come on.
Sir,
Bring it.
if I could just begin to address your issue. I think that the things that you just expressed, I would say, as a believing Muslim and someone who's studied Islam, are not the normative beliefs of Islam. I'll just take one of them, and I don't want to be in this position of the idea of if you're from another religion, Muslims or Islam teaches that you should have nothing to do with that. That is just simply not true. Muslims have historically and today, for example, built churches that have been burnt down. I just saw today, I just retweeted an effort on the part of American Muslims to raise money to rebuild the churches that were just burnt down by basically these hate crimes. So I invite you to read more about normative views.
But there are Muslims who absolutely agree with what you're saying. You know nothing about Muhammad, but let's just talk about what you just said right now. Yes, it's absolutely true. There are many, many Muslims who are misogynists, who are violent, who believe that you shouldn't that have a very, very sort of strict and conservative, exclusivist view of Islam, and who read the Quran without any kind of historical context. Absolutely. And yes, they absolutely use the Quran to promote violence. You couldn't be more right. The issue, however, is that that violence is overwhelmingly focused on other Muslims. They don't really care that much about what they call the far enemy. Yeah, they've got a problem with Christians and Jews, and that's fine, and we'll get to them eventually. But these are Puritans. And like Puritans of any religion, their primary concern is to purify their own faith of what they see as its aberrations, its heresies. Now, I understand that the only time anyone in this room tends to actually hear about one of these guys killing somebody else is when that somebody else that's killed is a white person. But I'm telling you now that the Muslim victims of these fanatics outnumber the non-Muslim victims by the tens of thousands. So this is a very large community that, as every religion has a huge diversity of opinions, including everything that you just said. Absolutely.
So we started 4 minutes late, so we're going to go 4 minutes late and leave time for final question. And it's going to be this woman here, right here. Thank you.
Hi. Meryl Chertoff from the Inclusive America Project at Aspen. I wanted to ask you a question about the intra-faith divide that you were talking about, sort of what's going on within the Muslim community in the U.S. Isn't that something which is really underreported? And don't you guys, and I've seen all of you on these TV, don't you kind of fall for the bait when you are willing to let your questioner ask you about something that's going on over there and make it appear as if that's what's going on in the American Muslim community? Because it seems to me, and I know nothing also about Islam like this gentleman, but it seems to me that there is a very different form of Islam emerging in the U.S. in part.
Great, thank you. Who wants to take that? Do you let them are you mistaken in letting them throw these questions at you?
Yeah, I mean, the conversations that I have with media tend not to be about the American Muslim community. They tend to be about the geopolitics, because that's my expertise. Dalia is much more of an expert on the American Muslim community, and so that's usually what she gets called to talk about. Yeah. And I try very hard not to allow any kind of blurring of the lines.
I think when you're talking to media, you have to have your own talking points, and you have to go into that interview kind of like, well, that's an interesting question, but let's talk about this. So if you're skilled in this craft, then you're going to be able to get your points across. But I think it's an important point. I think the American Muslim community is underreported. We often are asked to talk about something that's going on over there, and there is a really great story here that we don't talk about.
Highest rates of literacy? Yes, I'll get highest rates of literacy of any immigrant community in America, highest rates of education of any immigrant community in America. I mentioned the $170 billion, that's a big number, but the median household income for a Muslim family dwarfs that for a non-Muslim family. And by the way, 2/3 of the indigenous Muslim community, let's be clear here that Muslims have always been here. The first Muslims came to America on slave ships. But 2/3 of the
And explorers.
Explorers, yes. Two-thirds of the non-indigenous Muslim community is first generation. This is an immigration issue as much as it is a faith issue.
No, come on, because we want to honor your time.
Sorry.
And the good thing about these people is they make a living talking, because that's how they sell their books and get their name out there. So they're going to stay and talk to you if you have more questions. But thank you very much.